Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today. We are unpacking a truly vast, monumental subject based on the Chronicles of the Indian Heritage, A History of India. Okay, let's just dive right into this because we are looking at a story with a massive 10,000-year scope. Now, when you approach a timeline this huge, it's really easy to get lost in a sea of dates and names. But our goal today is not just to sit here and memorize facts. We're going to trace this profound, sweeping narrative of synthesis and incredible resilience that has shaped literally one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations.
And that brings us to the core question driving our whole exploration today. What defines a civilization that not only spans millennia, but actively thrives on constant transformation? I really want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go. We aren't just looking at some static list of events that happened a long time ago in the past. We're looking at a living, breathing story. It's about a culture that doesn't just survive the passage of time. It actively absorbs, adapts, and transforms through every single era.
To make sense of this massive timeline without getting totally lost, we've structured our journey into 6 clear chapters. The dawn of Indian heritage, empires of antiquity, the medieval convergence, the era of colonial rule, the journey to independence, and finally, a living historical legacy.
All right, kicking things off with Chapter 1, Dawn of Indian Heritage, the Roots of Civilization.
To truly understand the modern subcontinent, we've got to zoom way, way out and look at the very foundation of its earliest societies, just to see how deep these roots actually go into antiquity. We start with the earliest settlements well before the Common Era, communities just learning to harness the land. Then, this evolves into the peak of the Indus Valley civilization. We're talking remarkably advanced urban planning, architecture, and complex trade networks. From there, the era flows into the Vedic period, which is absolutely crucial because it laid down the philosophical and spiritual texts that are still resonating today. We are talking about thousands of years of foundational growth occurring before many other global empires even took their very first breath. Now, a quick heads up, when we use the word heritage here, we are definitely not talking about dusty relics locked away in a museum. Heritage consists of foundational, cultural, spiritual, and social practices established in antiquity that continuously evolve. The absolute key word here is evolve. The practices born in the Indus Valley or the Vedic period didn't just freeze in time, right? They became the bedrock upon which every subsequent generation built, modified, and expanded. Moving right along to Chapter 2, Empires of Antiquity, the Golden Ages. As we enter these classical eras, we see 2 very distinct flavors of empire. On one side, you have the Maurya Empire. Their legacy is completely defined by vast administrative integration, literally unifying a massive geographical area under a single bureaucratic structure, and the deliberate spread of foundational philosophies. It was an era of just unprecedented political scale. But then, contrast that with the Gupta Empire. The Guptas presided over this incredible flourishing of classical arts, groundbreaking mathematics, and a profound cultural golden age. So both empires represent a golden age, but one was characterized by serious organizational and philosophical unification, while the other was marked by spectacular intellectual and cultural output. So what's the so what here? The crucial point is how these ancient achievements ripple directly into our modern lives. Think about the concept of zero. Conceptualized during these classical Indian eras, zero is this world-changing micro-detail. I mean, imagine trying to write binary code or do calculus with Roman numerals. There's no way. Whenever you use a computer or a smartphone today, you are relying on a binary system made possible by an intellectual leap that happened in India during its golden age.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, the medieval convergence, the great synthesis. As global trade routes expanded and borders shifted, the subcontinent became a massive focal point for encountering the wider world. Moving into the Common Era, we see a transition from the early medieval kingdoms into the period of the Delhi Sultanate, which then eventually gives way to the rise of the Mughal Empire. And this wasn't just a simple change in administration. It was a massive, seismic shift in power dynamics. It brought arriving cultures, brand new languages, distinct architectural styles, and completely different administrative systems into direct contact with those deeply established indigenous traditions we just discussed. There is a quote that perfectly captures this dynamic, describing this era as a continuous living story of an ancient civilization absorbing new cultures. Rather than being overwritten, the Indian heritage acted almost like a vast cultural sponge. The medieval period was this spectacular era of synthesis, where arriving influences in art, cuisine, music, and governance were seamlessly woven into the existing cultural fabric. It created something entirely new and incredibly vibrant.
That takes us to Chapter 4, Era of Colonial Rule, the Colonial Pivot. Now, this era brought about a really fundamental economic shift. Pre-colonial structures were largely based on traditional economic integration. Wealth, trade, and resources circulated mostly within the subcontinent and its immediate trading partners, which sustained local industries. But the colonial model completely rewired this machinery for extraction. It shifted the focus to exporting raw materials and wealth outward. It is a stark structural pivot that fundamentally redefined the daily lives of millions of people. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. While this was, for sure, an era of immense economic extraction, it inadvertently catalyzed something else entirely, a unified national consciousness. The shared hardships and the deep systemic disruption caused by the colonial economy ultimately bound a highly diverse, vastly spread out population together. The intense pressures of this era forged a collective identity that just hadn't existed previously on such a unified national scale. And that sparks Chapter 5, Journey to Independence, The Awakening. Now, this complex struggle didn't happen overnight. It evolved in distinct waves. It began with an early national awakening among intellectuals. Then, that quickly snowballed into mass, nonviolent mobilization by literally millions of people. That immense, sustained pressure forced incremental legislative reforms, which ultimately culminated in the final push for full sovereignty, achieving complete independence. Let's actually break down the machinery of this movement. These were the key pillars. First, nonviolence, or ahimsa, an ancient philosophical concept brilliantly repurposed as a powerful political tool. Then, civil disobedience, which was the peaceful refusal to comply with unjust laws. Next was economic self-reliance, or swadeshi, directly countering that colonial extraction model by encouraging people to produce and buy local goods. And finally, political unity across deeply diverse linguistic and regional lines. These pillars didn't just win independence, they fundamentally defined the entire democratic ethos of modern India. Finally, we arrive at Chapter 6, A Living Historical Legacy, Shaping the Future. So what's the big takeaway here? Ultimately, India today is a vibrant synthesis of every single epoch, empire, and philosophy that came before it. You simply cannot understand modern India's geopolitics, its incredible economic growth, its technological boom, or its global cultural exports without understanding this deeply layered history. The roots of the Indus Valley, the intellectual leaps of the Guptas, the cultural blending of the Mughals, and that resilient awakening against colonial rule, they are all actively present in the DNA of the modern nation. I'm going to leave you with a final thought to chew on. How will this unparalleled heritage of synthesis and resilience shape our global future? As India takes an increasingly prominent role on the world stage, its 10,000-year playbook of adapting, surviving, and synthesizing new ideas is going to be incredibly relevant to all of us. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this journey has sparked your curiosity to dig even deeper into this fascinating subject. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.